American history is often taught as a clean, heroic story.
A story of brave leaders, noble ideas, and inevitable progress. But history, when simplified, leaves important truths behind. And some truths were never meant to be remembered. This is the part of American history schools don't like to talk about. Not because it isn't important, but because it is. Because it challenges the story Americans were taught to believe. And it forces uncomfortable questions about power, wealth, and memory. This is not an attack on America. It is an examination of what was left out. Because history remembered honestly is history understood. And understanding begins with listening. American schools often describe the Founding Fathers as united visionaries. Men driven purely by freedom, equality, and democracy. But unity was more appearance than reality.
We cannot ignore these divisions. Then propose a solution.
Behind closed doors, deep disagreements shaped the nation. Many of the founders feared democracy itself. They believed ordinary citizens could not be trusted with power. Only white men with property were allowed a voice. Women were excluded entirely. Labor built America, but often at the cost of lives and dignity. Sanitized history comforts, but understanding truth empowers. Because remembering helps prevent repeating mistakes.
Acknowledging the past allows us to build a more just future.
It reminds us that freedom and equality were fought for and are fragile. Because history is more than dates and heroes, it is people. When we confront the truths hidden in textbooks, we see America not as perfect, but as human. And understanding humanity is the first step toward change.
This is why these stories matter today.
Because the past shapes our laws, our culture, and our conscience. To ignore it is to repeat it. To face it is to understand. And understanding gives us power. Power to question, to learn, and to act. This is the legacy of truth.
It is messy, painful, and necessary.
And it belongs to everyone who calls America home. The first step toward understanding America is to see it as it truly was. Myths that shape generations. Textbooks rarely show the full cost of freedom. They celebrate founding fathers, but often ignore the enslaved, displaced, and exploited. Factories, mills, and mines appear as progress, while the human cost is erased. Even wars are sanitized. The story becomes easier to celebrate. But easier does not equal accurate. Recognizing what is omitted is crucial. Because sanitized history hides patterns.
Patterns of displacement, oppression, and inequality.
And they repeat across generations. Sanitized history comforts, but it also misleads.
The next segment will show why these stories matter today. History is not just the past, it shapes the present. The choices, compromises, and injustices of yesterday echo today.
Understanding history fully means confronting uncomfortable truths.
The land was stolen, and its memory remains.
Slavery was real, and its impact lingers.
Labor movements arose to fight back.
Strikes were met with violence.
The Haymarket Affair, the Homestead Strike, blood and sacrifice marked the fight for rights.
Children continued to work in mills and mines.
Their stories were rarely told in schools.
Yet this labor built the nation.
And its profits fueled future generations.
The industrial age was not just invention, it was survival. It was ambition built on human cost.
This era shaped modern America more than most realize.
Yet history books often celebrate progress while omitting the price.
The next chapter explores how history was sanitized.
History is never neutral. It is written by those in power.
Textbooks, newspapers, and films shape what is remembered.
Certain voices are amplified.
Violence, oppression, and exploitation are often footnotes.
Stories of native displacement, slavery, and labor are minimized.
Heroism, progress, national pride.
Even when the truth is complex and uncomfortable.
This sanitization creates myths.
Understanding this era reshapes how to see America.
Because freedom alone does not equal equality. And equality was never guaranteed.
The next chapter shows how industrial America rose on labor and inequality.
But that is a story for the next chapter.
By the late 19th century, America was changing faster than ever.
Steel, coal, and railroads built the nation. But this progress came at a price.
Men, women, and even children labored long hours.
In dangerous conditions. Injuries were common, deaths not uncommon.
Immigrants provided much of this labor.
They arrived with hope, but faced exploitation.
Pay was low. Hours were long. conditions were brutal.
Yet this era is often called progress, because wealth was concentrated at the top, while the masses labored in shadows. Violence against freed people rose across the South. Groups formed to intimidate and control.
Freed people sought to build schools, churches, and communities.
Welcome, children. Come inside.
This is our school now.
But opportunities were often blocked.
Sharecropping replaced freedom with economic chains.
Debt and control kept generations trapped. Reconstruction was meant to be transformative.
But white supremacist resistance was relentless. Laws were written, then ignored.
Promise became compromise.
Rights were granted, then stripped away.
Jim Crow laws solidified segregation. Segregation became a system, not an accident. Freed people persevered despite oppression.
Schools were built. Churches became centers of life. Communities resisted erasure.
Yet textbooks often skip this struggle. Instead, the focus is on the end of slavery, not the cost of freedom.
The truth is more complicated. The nation was free, but many were still enslaved in spirit.
Enslaved people resisted in countless ways. Secret messages, coded songs, acts of defiance. Yet history often remembers only the oppressors. The enslaved were footnotes, numbers, invisible labor.
The wealth of a nation was built on stolen lives.
Slavery did not end with the Civil War. Its consequences lingered in laws and social systems.
And in memory.
The stories of courage, pain, and survival were rarely taught. Yet understanding these stories changes how America is remembered.
Because freedom was promised, but only for some.
And injustice was written into the founding. Recognizing that is not an attack, it is truth.
And truth is the first step toward understanding.
The next chapter uncovers a period often forgotten: Reconstruction. The Civil War ended, and slavery was abolished on paper. But freedom did not arrive overnight.
Reconstruction promised rights, land, and protection.
Amendments were passed, laws were written,
but implementation was resisted. Even when textbooks do not.
but stolen land was only part of the foundation.
Another truth was built on human bondage.
Slavery was not a brief chapter, it was a foundation. It shaped the economy, society, and politics of early America.
Children grew up seeing bondage as ordinary. Communities were divided by law and by fear.
The legal system treated humans as property. Families were separated at will.
Children sent to strangers, parents powerless.
The violence was systemic.
Not sensationalized for cruelty, but coded into daily life.
This created a society built on fear
And silence.
Textbooks often focus on dates, laws, and abolition.
But they rarely show the human cost. The daily struggle. The loss of childhood. The grief. And the resilience. Thousands died along the way. Not from war, but from hunger, disease, and exposure.
Children and elders were the most vulnerable.
Entire cultures were uprooted.
Language faded.
Sacred places were destroyed.
And history reduced it to a footnote.
Progress was the word used.
Manifest destiny made it sound inevitable.
But destiny is a choice. And these choices were enforced by power. By law. By weapons. And by silence afterwards. Because acknowledging the truth complicates the story.
America did not simply expand. It reveals expanding borders pushing against existing communities.
It displaced. And that legacy still echoes today. The land remembers. They are born human. And understanding that is the first step toward honesty. The next chapter of American history reveals an even deeper silence. A silence written across stolen land. Before America expanded west, the land was already inhabited. Millions of indigenous people lived on it for generations. Each nation had its own laws, languages, and traditions. But early American expansion saw land as something to be claimed, not shared. Not negotiated, but taken. Treaties were written to give the appearance of fairness. In reality, they were rarely honored.
More than 500 treaties were broken.
Each broken promise meant lost land,
Lost homes, and lost lives.
Removal was often described as relocation.
But it was forced displacement.
The Trail of Tears was not an exception.
So were Native Americans.
And millions of enslaved people.
Yet the language of freedom was written anyway.
The contradiction was not accidental.
Many founders owned enslaved people. Some wrote passionately about liberty while denying it to others. This was not hypocrisy hidden by ignorance.
It was a deliberate compromise.
Unity mattered more than justice. And economic stability mattered more than equality. The Constitution itself reflects these fears.
It protected property before it protected people.
Slavery was not abolished at the founding.
It was postponed.
Kicked down the road for future generations to solve. The founders knew the conflict would come.
They simply hoped it would not come in their lifetime.
This version of history makes people uncomfortable. Notice how the details begin to shift.
Because it challenges the idea of perfect beginnings.
But nations are not born pure.